For the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Motion to approve the agenda, please.
Second.
Moved by Mark, seconded by Dana, that we approve the agenda. Is there any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion carries. To the consent agenda, we need approval of the City Council meeting minutes of September 16th, 2024. B, we need to set the date for a public hearing for October 21st at 5:30 p.m. on renewal of gas and electric franchise agreements with Alliant Energy, doing business as Interstate Power and Light. C, set date and time for trick or treating for October 31st from 5:30 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. D, approval of the bid from Dean Snyder Construction, Clear Lake, in the amount of $10,954 for bathrooms accessibility upgrades at the library. E, we have a resolution, Resolution 2464, a resolution adopting a revenue purpose statement for the use of revenues from gas and electric franchise fees. F, approval of professional services proposal from Planscape Partners for the preparation of an urban revitalization plan for Stone Brook Condominium Housing Development Project in the amount of $3,500. G, approval of application to the city's downtown retail business incubator program for Livonia's, the old county seat, Cafe 408 Main Avenue. H, approval of the bills and claims, of which you have a copy. We have the following license, a liquor license, VFW Post 4868. That's a renewal. Motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Bennett, seconded by Mark, that we approve the consent agenda. Since we have a resolution, I'll do a roll call. Mark.
Yes.
Creighton.
Yes.
Bennett.
Yes.
And Dana.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0, and the consent agenda is approved. Just for everyone's information, Councilperson Beth Ann Schumacher is ill and is not with us this evening. Now is the time and place for any citizen in the audience who wishes to address the council and any issue or concern that is not on the agenda. Please approach the podium, state your name first and last, and give your address so the clerk can properly enter it into the minutes. This is not a discussion time nor a question and answer time, but it is an opportunity for you to speak to the council. None appearing, we'll move on to unfinished business, of which we have none. We'll do directly to new business. A, presentation of North Iowa Children's Museum feasibility report. Intro by Scott Flory, City Administrator, and Lorena with the North Iowa Children's Museum. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. We've got the purple sheets in your packet to address this particular item. That's just a copy of the executive summary. It's about 6 pages long there that was included in the recently completed feasibility study for the North Iowa Children's Museum project here in Clear Lake. And that, of course, was conducted by Consult Econ, the firm that was selected. If you recall, back in, I think it was February, the council did get into a letter of intent with the North Iowa Children's Museum to offset some of the costs associated with conducting a feasibility study for North Iowa Children's Museum project here in Clear Lake. And after an RFP process was gone through, ultimately Consult Ed was selected for this particular project, and they've now completed the proposal. And the thing, it was about 111 pages long, so it was definitely a comprehensive, pretty robust study. But again, you got the executive summary in your packet that identifies kind of, I think, the high points of the feasibility study. Again, the study examines the facility that is contemplated for Clear Lake, located out in Emerald Edge subdivision, about a 17,000 square foot facility. So that's what's under consideration for the feasibility study. And I know Bob with Consult Econ is here to review the findings and conclusions from the feasibility report here with council this evening, but that's all I've got in the way of any background for an introduction. I know Lorena is here. She may also want to make a few comments as well, but looking forward to Bob's report here to the council.
Questions for Scott? Thank you, Scott. Lorena? Welcome, Lorena.
Thank you for having us back. I don't have anything additional to say that Scott didn't already mention. I guess just to say that I found the study to be very favorable, and I'm excited for you all to hear what Bob Bray, the Vice President of Council Econ, has to say. So he's on the phone. He's not here in person. He's on the East Coast, but I'll hand it over to him. Is he logged in?
Okay.
I am.
Bob, are you there?
I am, and thank you.
Okay. If you can give us a
Mayor, council members.
yes. Go ahead and give your statement. We're going to turn you up just a bit here. Okay.
Thank you.
You're on.
Okay, very good. Okay, so I want to thank, the city and Scott, Mr. Mayor, Lorena for, the opportunity to do this study and also the help feedback they provided upon their review. As was noted, that's a 111-page report, and so we do dig in pretty well, I think, for our studies. A little background on Consulticon. We were founded in 1991. I'm founding member, if you will. During that time, we've completed over 1,100 assignments, both public and private sector clients. Our specialty is in feasibility studies and evaluations for touristic and not-for-profit attractions, tourism studies, and also community redevelopment, that sort of thing. In Iowa, we worked on the original study for the Dubuque Mississippi River Museum, that you probably know, an aquarium, the principal river walk in Des Moines and other places. So we've worked extensively in Iowa and the Midwest. Now, about 56, I am told by our crack staff, of our studies have been for 36 children in discovery/science facilities. Some of these have been built, some are still in the planning stages, and some just didn't, work out for those communities. Some of the ones that have been built include Reno, Nevada, Bentonville, Arkansas, the Amazium, Explorer Moore in Buffalo, in Everwonder in Newtown, Connecticut, and Port Wonder Children's Museum, Lake Charles. And those two last ones that I spoke about are really in much smaller communities. But, we learn from our work both in the smaller and the larger communities. So, and we're currently working in Jonesboro, Arkansas, and in Vermont on Children's Museum study. So our study covered 6 or 7 basic topics. These include a site evaluation. We visited Clear Lake, Emerald Edge site, went over to Mason City, get a good idea of your community, very nice, of course. We reviewed the resident market and local attractions and so on. Looked at the tourism market, which is a very special part of your market demand and your feasibility, if you will. We reviewed 7 targeted benchmark children's museums for their, if you will, factors about population size and things of that nature. We estimated the optimum ticket price, and then based on all of that information above, said, well, what's your attendance potential range? And then from that range of attendance and the type of attendance, what's your potential earned revenue? And we also looked at the planned endowment that would fund, some of the operating costs. We prepared a personnel plan and operating budget commensurate with the attendance, earned revenue in the facility, your community, and then we reconciled those things and worked around to try to fine-tune all of it so they fit well together. Some of the highlights is, that Emerald Edge location does make a lot of sense. It's a good site. Highway 18, the main thoroughfare. The Clear Lake has both a resident market and tourist market, which I was talking about. One important thing is the competitive context. The closest children's museums are about 100 miles or more away, so you really have this area to serve. And in your part of the world, obviously, people drive good distances to do the various things that are in their lives. The 0 to 60-mile market is 206,000 people or so, and the 32,000 of them are the children 0 to 12. You have a good, again, stating the obvious, high tourism in Clear Lake based on, you know, your lake, but also on your festivals, things like that. We don't have an exact number of that, but it's a very strong market for you. The project itself, Scott mentioned 17,270 square feet. We looked at that plan and, you know, really looked at it. It's a sensible plan. It's a very good start for, you know, what is a process of designing a children's museum, a specialized, you know, museum form. And that size museum and what it would offer is large enough to engage repeat visitors and really be a regional attraction. If it were, you know, a fair amount smaller, be a more of a local attraction. But that 17,000 square feet or thereabouts, it would have, you know, good power to have strong repeat visitation, you know, members, families becoming members and so on, and then also being a real draw for your community. Okay, so in terms of the attendance potential, the range is 46,000 to 60,000, 46,000 to 60,000. Think about that range as sort of a bell curve. The most likely attendance in the middle, then lesser chance at the edges. The best mid-range estimate of potential is 53,000. About 70% of those visitors would come from the resident market, 30% tourists. Usually, and those tourists usually VFRs, long day trips, people you know, visiting their people who have homes on the lake and so on and so forth. The optimum ticket price we're thinking is $12 a ticket, $6 for school groups, and then memberships are really important for a children's museums. You know, when families are at that stage of their life, you know, they often become members and are going very, very frequently. That attendance that I talked about, that range, does include repeat visitation. So it certainly is not 46 to 60,000 individual people, but rather, you know, some much smaller number of people who visit multiple times. That's on the resident market side, and then the tourists don't have as much repeat, you know, attendance based on what you know, what they are. The operating plan includes 6 full-time and 5 part-time employees, and that's about 60% of the operating budget at $780,000. Other parts are, it's really a business, is a children's museum, utilities, building maintenance, the exhibits themselves, and refurbishing, cleaning, marketing, all that sort of thing. And that kind of a budget and the building and the full-time employees are really enough to attract that kind of potential attendance and the revenues. So there's good balance between all those driving factors that I was just talking about. The earned revenue potential covers about 81% of that operating budget. The proposed endowment about 17%, and about 2% ongoing fundraising. So that's, you know, pretty strong performance for many children's museums. But the part that is a little you have to kind of understand is that from a feasibility perspective, study perspective, we go in and say, well, what does it cover? What does it take to cover, you know, your operating costs and make a go of it, you know, in a very reasonable way? Hopefully, as moving forward, maybe you'll be able to have better fundraising than $15,000 or so, which is what we included the local community, because the endowment, as planned, is appropriate and strong for that. So it may be that over time you're able to earn, have more fundraising, and if so, you can probably do more exciting things for children with the operating budget, and more programs and exhibits and so on and so forth. But that operating budget, again, at $780,000 seems very reasonable for that. And so that's a good balance there. Now, finally, why a children's museum? Well, children's museums are really proliferating throughout the United States. Many communities all over the place are developing, small communities, developing children's museums because of the benefits they create. Families, children, the children's museum's been associated with strong educational outcomes. From an economic development perspective, they really help attract young families, keep young people in your community. And in many smaller towns like yours, young people go off to Chicago or wherever and go to college. Well, so many times people come back, but you've really got to have the infrastructure to bring people back, and particularly in a community like yours with it's a really attractive community. This will really help you in keeping young people, and so on and so forth. And then the economic value also means job creation, increased tourism, and that sort of thing. So, you really have a good opportunity here, and we hope you consider it. These are major projects for a community. We certainly understand that, but many communities have really benefited from them. Any questions or comments?
Yes, Bob, I'm going to ask the council if they have any questions for you, as well as Lorena and Scott. And then after that, this is just a procedural thing. After that, then I'm going to have the council discuss that between ourselves here. So that's the next steps here. So council, do you have any questions for Bob? And thank you, Bob, for this presentation.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, I do. Bob, this is Councilmember Smith. I want to thank you again for your presentation. I've got a few questions for you. My first one is, I noticed in the comparable communities in your study included one in Carroll, Iowa that started in an empty mall space. In fact, I read an article earlier today about that. This worked out very well for them. So I was just curious, how often do these museums get a start in an existing building like that, either in a mall or some other type of refurbished building?
Yeah, there really are, as you note, some, they go both ways. And the question for that point goes to where it's located. Is it the appropriate size? Are you taking on the right size building? And perhaps more importantly, from a business perspective, does that setting create the opportunity for this to become really a destination? So it's like many investments you make. If you make something with really superior market attractiveness, your revenue opportunities are much higher. And so it kind of, and I understand there's that idea, well, it might be less expensive to get into that kind of a situation. So you're lessening that risk of the capital risk up front. But what you're taking on is more market risk, because that's not as attractive, most likely a setting and just a place, so that you're taking on more market risk. Oh, will we get that earned revenue, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
So you might be limiting your opportunity to move forward and have that kind of benefit to the community. It's a trade-off.
Right, and I understand that argument, and it kind of leads me to my next question, though. So to try and find an example of that, could you point me to another community, for example, in the United States, with a roughly similar population as ours, that has a new children's museum of this size?
Yeah, and just opening up this summer, actually, is a community that we've worked with over the years, and that is Lake Charles, Louisiana. And it has, similar, it's a little bit bigger in scale, but not so much bigger. It has a little bit less, wide regional, area that it serves than you do. So there's good comparability there. But it also is a lake with tourism, and they are opening up their children's museum this summer. And the community's reaction to it has been very, very good.
Okay, thank you. And then just one final question for you, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues. But I was just curious in reviewing the study. I mean, my understanding typically with an endowment, you'd use an endowment for, say, capital projects, potentially when you, for example, need to refurbish the exhibits or something like that. In this study, it seems like it relies on money from the endowment for a kind of operating reserve for the facility. And I'm just wondering, is that normal? It struck me as not quite normal, but I'll let you comment.
Yeah, that's really, and thank you for that. So in terms of endowments, there are two parts to that. One is, as you've talked about, many museums use an endowment to, fund their future capital needs. Now, in this case, we have included in that $780,000 budget an annual, if you will, sinking fund, or there are different capital reserves. There are different terms for this, but we've included, capital reserves in the budget annually to take on refurbishment of the utilities and things of that nature. Now, because you have an interesting situation in that the raw number of people in the community is modest, and you're nearby to Mason City, but you're not the biggest city. So there's some peculiarities, and I hate the word peculiarities, but differences in your makeup. So if you're able to fund initially through your initial capital project, you can, in a sense, fund that portion of your operating budgets, which in most communities come from, say, government grants, foundation grants, community giving, and all that. So in this instance, the strategy which North Iowa Children's Museum is using is to kind of fund that portion of the typical operating budget right up front, and not have that be every year kind of that overhang of, now we're out fundraising and all that. So it's very interesting, and I think a great strategy if your community can make it happen.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks, Bennett. Any other comments, council? Questions? Not appearing. Scott, do you have a question?
I don't have a question.
Okay, Lorena? No. All right, thanks, Bob. We're going to have some input here with our council members, and then that will be it. If you'd like to stay on board, that's fine, your choice. So I'll start with Dana.
Sounds like an exciting project. Sounds like it could be attainable if you raise a lot of money. So I guess my biggest question and biggest concern would be, how do you raise that much money to build a building that big? It's a great location, but I'm just curious, and how long do you think it will take? Because are we talking like $11 million, I believe, and a $3 million endowment? So where do we find that kind of money? I guess is my question. I'm excited to hear. I know you might not have that answer, but I am curious.
Thank you. Bennett?
Thank you, Mayor. And I want to thank the North Iowa Children's Museum for being here tonight, and again, for Bob and his presentation. People enjoy what you do here in the community, and I think that's very positive. But I will say my concerns for a long time have focused on the size and sustainability of this project. And this study has really done nothing to lessen those concerns. In fact, it's raised them even higher. I have reviewed the study carefully, and my conclusions are that the numbers presented here are overly optimistic given the current population in our area. Most of the benchmark communities in the study are much larger, and in my view, the study relies far too much on the fact that we are a regional destination for tourism in order to compensate for our lack of population, which is a riskier assumption in my view. I would base this off of population with tourism as a kind of bonus. I think that would be a much more conservative and appropriate approach. Another concern I have is just the overall cost of the project. With a new building, exhibits, and endowment, this has to be in the $13 to $15 million range, and I just don't see how that is realistic at all. As I have pointed out many times in the past, finding an existing building to work with would be far more realistic and prudent. The size of the operating budget is also a significant concern given the struggle that many of these museums have on an ongoing basis. So in conclusion, I do want to thank the Children's Museum for their contributions to our community. They do a fantastic job, and I want to wish them well, but I just do not think that a project of this size and scope is feasible for a city of our size. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you. Great.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to the North Iowa Children's Museum Group for all the work that you continue to put into this project, for engaging our students and children already. I know you had a very successful event recently, again, with the pigs flying event. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend this year. I've made it the other years, but my kids had soccer. But you, again, I think that this study has actually highlighted how well you've done so far in your planning. Also, not only your planning, but also the pre-work that you did on your own feasibility study. Lorena, I know you did a lot of that, and the whole group has worked together well. And this group and this study has looked at what you've put together and said, it is possible. I think as Dana pointed out, of course, there's a lot of money to be raised, and that's what your group is working towards right now as appropriate. So there is a big hill to climb for sure. But what we did here is the council requested, and I know Bennett started that request probably a year before we actually got to it, is we requested a feasibility study, looked for someone who's done these feasibility studies. As Bob pointed out, I think they've done over 1,100 projects. I don't know if he said 36 or 56 that were Children's Museum, but one of those numbers. So they've done these, they've looked in small communities, they've looked in big communities. Some of those projects have made it, some of them have not yet, some of them are in progress. But what we did is we worked with you to hire an expert in this field who's done this time and time again, and an expert who knows the numbers and who looked at what we have in our area and came up with what their expert advice was here. And again, I think their expert advice only highlights the work that you've put together and shows that this is feasible if you're able to raise that money, build the building, and have an endowment. Now, those are big asks, of course, for the community, but you know that, and that's why you're working towards raising that money. The council has you've basically done the next step that the council has put out, which was go through the feasibility study. The feasibility showed that what you've put forth so far is a positive effort. It shows that if you did it this way, it is feasible in the future. So again, great work by your team. Thank you for all the work that you continue to do. Of course, continue to put on all the smaller events. Well, they're not smaller events, they're bigger events that you get to be a big part of. And I know my children love seeing even the mobile stuff, so I love that you're able to do that while going after this big dream that you have for our community. So thank you.
Thanks, Creighton. Mark?
Excuse me. I appreciate the hard work and dedication you all have. This is monumental, to say the least, in my mind. As Dana had mentioned, that's a lot of dollars. And that's going to be not easy to raise. And I hope you're able to do that. I think it'd be a great benefit to all of North Iowa. But to piggyback on what Bennett said, I think it'd be great to start out somewhere small and really get your feet under you and see how it goes and grow from there. I've been part of raising money for an endowment, and it's not easy. You're looking at a building and an endowment. Boy, that's going to be tough. I wish the feasibility study would have touched on that, the ability to actually raise those funds. That would have helped a lot, I think. But yeah, I'd say keep up the good work and don't give up. Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. I was one of those guys that had an opportunity to kiss one of those flying pigs, but I lost. And Sweet Adeline did win and should have won from the beginning. And what a great, unique idea that was. And thanks to Andy Meyer for doing that as well. But you know, this town of 7,600 people, Clear Lake, we do a lot. For a small town, USA, we are right up there with many of the larger communities, and we do a good job at it. We really do. Here again, we're thinking big time for Clear Lake, Iowa. 7,600 people, Clear Lake, Iowa, when we already have a ton on our plate. However, I've always said if it's probable, we need to make it possible. And that's the toughest thing, as has been said all along the dais here tonight, of the how. It's easy to think these up. Not real easy, but it is easy to think these up. But to get it accomplished and the how of the old who, why, what, where, when is the tough part. And that's where you are. That's where we are as a community. Some people in this audience tonight know that in my 40 years of education, Florrie's going to say, all right, here we go again. But I spent 3 years teaching elementary children. I was never going to be a teacher. But a gentleman passed away, and the superintendent happened to know that I was home, having just graduated from college, and had a different job, and was then drafted and said, hey, could you fill in for us? And so 40 years later, I quit in education. But these were elementary kids, and that's what this is focused on. I believe it's 3 to 12 is kind of the range. I had kind of the upper end of that range. But kids like that need to get out of the house every once in a while And it's not just that when we have a children's museum, that's the only opportunity they have to get out of their house, but it is an opportunity. Opportunities for young kids to experience underscore, is very, very important. That's what a children's museum that I have read, and the epistle that I read that dear Bob put out as a result of this survey, sometimes put me to sleep, but other times really sparked me to saying, why can't we? Well, as Mark just alluded to, that ain't easy. Sorry, grammar teachers, but it is not easy to do that. However, we must, in the thought process, be flexible, because there are options and there are opportunities, but we cannot get stuck in a rut. We say, by golly, I'm going to do this, come blank or high water. And we've got to do this because we want the kids to have an experience like this. True, I just discussed this morning with Scott, and I discussed it with Jacob. Jacob, having small kids living out in the country, has done this before, gone to these museums before, or a museum before. Scott and I discussing the whole epistle, and we did come across that Christopher Banks empty store in Carroll, Iowa. Carroll, Iowa, very, very similar to Clear Lake, Iowa. A very small store, and they were going to start a children's museum there. I don't know if that's smart or if that's not smart. Do you get stuck there? Would it be better to kind of look at the size? Because once again, it's for the kids. We're doing this for the kids. Do we have to have a specific size of building for the kids? I know within that you have displays. There's a better word for each of the things that are around there for them to experience. And is that basically the reason for the size? My guess is yes, it is. But can we bring that down a bit to start with? Because once this gets going, I'm convinced it will take off and fly sky high. It'll really do. Things in this town go very, very well when people are focused on it. But if there are cutback options to what is going on now, I'd like for you to really think of the how with regard to that, if that's possible. It's not the brick and mortar. It's the kids we're talking about. And how can we do this for the kids? It's their opportunity to interact with various settings. Contrary to my mother that hauled me into New York City to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Scott Flory hauled me to the Joslin Museum in Omaha to look at pictures on the wall. They don't move. You can't do anything with those. I'm not running Scott Flory down because it was a good experience for me.
In my defense, they had a Rembrandt at the time. So.
Yeah. But if you can understand what I'm saying, I hope we don't get caught in a tunnel here and say, by golly, we're not going to do this unless we get this, and this. Be thinking of the kids and how can we fit them into the process that is in your minds right now. But thank you for bringing this. Been years now, hasn't it? Since you walked into Scott's office, I remember that very, very well. It's a long time. And you've hung in there and stick with it. Stick with it. All right. Bob, thank you for being on with us if you're still there. Appreciate.
I am, and very helpful points that are being made. A quick note is that the point of exactly 17,000 square feet, that will come out in the process. But there's the big point, whether it's 17,000 or 15 or 18, 18,000, whatever. There's a certain scale and a certain offerings back of house you need and it certainly isn't exactly that number. So I think the idea of working forward towards what, finding that point of it's big enough to do the job, and this is the, we can, and it does have that value to the community. That's really the point you should be pushing for, and it certainly isn't exactly 17,200 square feet.
All right, appreciate that information, Bob. Thanks, and appreciate you doing this for it, and have a good evening.
Your Mayor, if I might just
too. Thank
you.
add one more on that.
Yeah.
I was going to mention a point that Bob just made. I
Bob,
think,
are you there?
he's okay. But I think, yep, I think on many of these projects that we get involved in, whether it's a planning study, whether it's a feasibility report, many times the end result doesn't look exactly like what original concept plan or the feasibility study called for. So I do think that there's a lot of value that has been added here with the feasibility report that will enable some form of project to move forward here. I think everybody up here has expressed strong support for the project and the societal purposes that it creates for our community and for the kids that go there. I don't know, well, I'm sure like everything somebody's against it, but I mean, it's a project that I think it would be very hard for the majority of people to oppose. It's a good project. I think it's just a matter of right-sizing it, using the feasibility study as a tool to determine ultimately what is the best product for the community. But excited to see things move forward. It is a big hill to climb, so hopefully they can climb it.
Well put, Scott, thanks. Lorena, did you have a comment, or you're fine? You're fine. All right, Bob, take care. Thank you.
Take care. You too. Good night.
Good night. All right, we'll move on to 6B. Thank you all. Thank everybody. That was great discussion. 6B, Emerald Cove First Subdivision Housing Development Project Review Project Update. Matt Steddingson, City Engineer. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. Hope everybody's having a good evening. So if you want to flip to your pink sheets in your packet, we'll start off here with the Emerald Cove First Subdivision. Myself, along with Becky Swab, project engineer, as well as Garrett McKennis, the prime on the project, conducted a punch list walkthrough last week of all the public infrastructure throughout the development. And out of this came the certificate of completion, which sits before you here, where Becky states in her professional opinion that the work completed was done so in conformance with the approved plans and the City of Clear Lake specifications. And I would have to concur with her opinion on that. The construction went very well out there on the Emerald Cove First Subdivision, and like stated here, the public improvements are completed and the developers are very excited to get in there and start going vertical. So we are looking to accept these improvements tonight. And if you guys want to flip the sheet quick, you'll notice that the public improvement portion come out to around a total of $610,000 there. If any of you recall earlier, we did initial cost opinions at the beginning of this project where the public improvement portion came out around they varied, but around $350,000. Now the discrepancy there would be that original cost opinion for the public improvement portion was just specifically looking at North 14th Street extension. It did not include any of the public improvements, sanitary, water, storm sewer within the private development, which we are now accepting during this phase. So that's the additional cost which are added there. Everything did come in on budget, so there is nothing, alarming along those lines. So it would be my recommendation to approve these public improvements, and we will be on our way to some vertical construction. If you guys have any questions at all, I'd be happy to answer.
I see they have the sites all plotted out. Is that platted out or staked out? Staked out.
Staked out, yes, sir. That's for starting the foundation so that they know everything's getting built within the property lines on the subdivision there. So, and yeah, later this month we will be running that final plat through as well. So that's everything is currently set and platted. They're doing the staking for foundation purposes right now.
And that road surface and curbs were well done.
Correct, yes. Wicks did the curb and gutter, and Heartland did the asphalt, as which they do most of in our town, so.
Yeah.
It was a good project.
Ask Matt, did you have a final number? Did Becky share with you the final number on the total improvement cost for the infrastructure there, including the road, the interior road, and the curb and gutter all?
Not have
Because I
the
think it
overall
was,
final.
I think it was somewhere in that $1 million category, if I
Yeah.
remember right. Yep.
Yep, just a little over, but I do not have that final, but I can get it.
Any other questions for Matt, council? Thank you, Matt.
Yes, sir.
Therefore, I'll entertain a motion to approve Resolution 2465, a resolution approving final public improvements for Emerald Cove First Subdivision, Clear Lake, Iowa. Motion, please.
So moved.
Moved by Dana, seconded by Mark, that we approve Resolution 2465. Is there any discussion? Roll call. Creighton,
Yes.
Bennett,
Yes.
Dana,
Yes.
and Mark.
Yes.
Motion carries 4-0. Resolution 2465 is duly adopted. 6C, presentation regarding management plan for Eurasian water milfoil for Clear Lake. Review, Joel Swickenberg, our watershed coordinator. Welcome, Joel.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So yes, I'm here to discuss the management of Eurasian water milfoil. We had a public meeting on September 12th with Jason Euchner, Kim Bogenschutz, and Scott Grummer, where we discussed the current state of this invasive species in Clear Lake, as well as the path forward for management. In your packet, I've provided some basic background information, as well as what they have done in the past and the path forward. So, the effect of this submersive plant is its effect on the ecosystem has reduced. It reduces the sunlight that based on the canopy. This affects the germination of those native plants, as well as it is a low quality food source for waterfowl. And because of this canopy, it creates unnavigable waters for lake users. So not only is it affecting the ecosystem, but it's going to be affecting those using the lake. The DNR, over the last 40 years, they've done aggressive management of this aquatic plant. Examples of this is at Crystal Lake, where it was first identified in 1995. They did a full lake treatment, which is what we're looking to do in Clear Lake. They eradicated it for 26 consecutive years. And they used the same herbicide that we're looking at applying at Clear Lake, which is Sonar AS. And it is a systemic herbicide, which is drawn up through the entire plant. Conversely, like a contact herbicide, which is an example of that is Tribune, which is what we did use in August to treat the 150 acres over by Farmers Beach access. We had our first identification in 2023 over by the Baptist camp. We utilized the herbicide Procelicor EC, which is a very similar herbicide as Sonar, except that it is more fast acting. So the difference between Sonar and Procelicor is really the contact time needed. So Procelicor takes 7 to 10 days, pretty similar to where Tribune has an effect, but the difference being that contact versus systemic application. Tribune is a very good herbicide, except that it has trouble being effective at deeper waters. So 8 feet or deeper, it shows that it doesn't have quite the effectiveness. And if you can't make contact with the entire plant, that regeneration is plausible. So through the 2024 season, DNR have done aquatic surveys, and this is how we identified those different sections of the lake and then completed those spot treatments. Over the 2024 period, those 2 applications costed a total of relatively $27,000. What the DNR have developed a best management practice to eradicate this plan is that utilizing that sonar AS for an entire lake application. Their management plan includes applying it in mid to late October. Then the reason for this is so that the growth process of Eurasian milfoil as well as curly leaf pondweed starts to germinate about this time of year, September to October, and then continues into the fall and into winter, and then kind of stays in a dormant state throughout the winter, and then come spring at about 55 degrees water temperature, that's when it continues to grow. And so because it starts to grow in the fall and starts its continuation of growth early in spring prior to when native plants are beginning to grow, that's where the out competition occurs. And so out competing your native plants is going to create a change in the ecosystem. So applying it now does not affect the native plants because it will, especially at the concentration that is intended to be applied. That targeted rate of application with this herbicide is 5 parts per billion. To kind of bring it back to Crystal Lake, when they did apply it in 1994, they had done it at 15 parts per billion. And this is just because they did not have the research available to show what an effective concentration was. That same application, so if we were to apply it at the 5 parts per billion, it would be less expensive than that 15 parts per billion, just because of research that has been done and the knowledge that we know now to be effective on this Eurasian milfoil. What kind of looking towards that application, the contact time of sonar versus Priscillacor, it takes about 90 to 120 days for that herbicide to infiltrate into the lake, or excuse me, into the plants. And so that long retention time is really what the concern is here, or the need for application. And what the plan is to perform this test and then have concentration tests about every 2 to 3 weeks to ensure that we have appropriate concentration of the herbicide to be effective. That threshold of concentration to maintain effectiveness is a 2.5 to 3 parts per billion. So what we're looking at is the initial application to get that 5 parts per billion, and then maintaining the 3 parts per billion. The adverse effects of this there is no adverse effects on swimming, any recreational use, drinking water, which I don't suggest drinking lake water, but so no real negative effect. And also it doesn't have any effect to like the oxygen content in the lake, so there's really not going to be an effect to anglers as well as recreational users. After the initial application and the continuation of testing, this is obviously the best outcome. That total application cost is about $290,000. With the Iowa DNR, as well in association with the Lake Restoration Project or program, have budgeted for that initial application through multiple sources. And what we're looking for is a conservative reserve of this herbicide in order to maintain that concentration throughout the winter season. And so kind of the dollar and cents for a 1 part per billion bump to maintain that concentration over the winter is about 56,000, and that's 27 gallons of the herbicide to be applied. Things that are going to affect the need to do those bumps is going to be weather conditions. So your precipitation as well as ice coverage. So increased rainfall, snow melt, anything that's going to increase our lake is going to dilute those concentrations and outfall out of the lake. And so at that point, then we're going to have to apply some more herbicide to maintain that concentration. Another thing is going to be if we have little ice coverage or snow melt, then sun penetration also breaks down that herbicide, and that will also affect the concentration of that herbicide. So what we have in place right now is we have appropriate funding for the initial application through the DNR. They have developed this plan. Ideally, we would have liked to have done it in 2024 just to stay ahead of it, because the adverse effect of not doing it sooner than later is we have a native water milfoil, the northern water milfoil, and there is potential for hybridization. And those hybridizations can then become resistant to herbicides. And so the urgency is always going to be the important part here. So, but after consideration and conversation within DNR, they have foregone that so that we can develop relationships with our local partners to find some additional funding to, one, to support that conservative herbicide reserve. In the interim, so the intent is to do the application in 2025, and over the growth cycle of 2025, so over the spring, summer, and fall season, DNR intend to continue their aquatic surveys. This is how we identified and found those spots where those infestations that we did spot treatments on. They already have some herbicide on hand to treat all the boat ramps if some is identified, as well as their watercraft inspectors will be looking out for these and for identification of any invasive or any Eurasian infestations. So with that, there's a cost benefit, or excuse me, a estimated cost. So the $279,000 for the initial treatment. The reserve that we'd like to have is a 2 to 3 parts per billion reserve. So effectively $168,000, and then the cost for the testing over that 90 to 120 days is $2,200. So there will be 7 tests throughout the 120 days, and this would be testing both the Little Lake as well as Clear Lake. One thing to note is, with the weather condition changes, if one water basin has a 4 parts per billion concentration, and say the Little Lake has a 2.5, we can treat just one water basin and still be effective. And so that will really change, how much money that we're going to have to utilize in that conservative reserve. After the meeting, but we did have a successful meeting and we had a lot of good feedback. We did show some individual interest in donations to support this project. What we're looking at is funneling those donations through the APCL, and so that we can, individuals can receive tax credit for those donations, as well as, and then we can earmark those donations to go specifically to this project. So really today, I'm here to educate you guys on the status, the current state, as well as what the DNR has in place for a management plan, and get some feelers out to see what type of funding that we can receive from you guys, as well as City of Ventura, our county, and any other local partners. I will say one additional benefit is with this application, a 1-year treatment of curly leaf pondweed will also be applied. So I know that's a public interest benefit.
And that's being paid by DNR, the first application.
That's correct. So the
All right.
lake restoration program in association with the DNR will have allocated a budget for that initial application.
And that's the 280, 290?
Yes, that's correct.
Thousand, all right.
And so what we're really looking at is funding for the reserve herbicide and then the testing,
Okay,
the
so-
concentration testing.
So if you're doing that first application in 2025, spring, summer 2025, correct?
This
In
would-
Clear Lake?
So the application is intended to be in fall of 2025.
Oh,
So we
okay,
have,
so
we
we're
have
done.
an entire year
All right.
to allocate these funds.
And then, if I understand this right, then the following year, right, you'll do what you're saying, you call it the bump.
Yeah, so
Okay.
the, kind of the timeline would be about this time next year, they would, pretty much prior to ice in,
Uh-huh.
they would do the
First step,
initial application,
right.
yep, to achieve that 5 parts per billion,
Uh-huh.
or excuse me, 5 parts per billion concentration.
Uh-huh.
And then over the next 90 to 120 days, the time it takes to absorb into the plant, that will be where we're testing the concentration to ensure that it is at the threshold that we need to be effective.
Okay.
And
All right.
then that following year would be where we don't have any curly leaf pondweed, as well as that would be the eradication period.
Right.
So
And
by 2026, we would potentially have eradicated Eurasian water milfoil.
Right. And the reason we're taking that out is that it gets hooked on the lower unit and drags everything up. But it only bothers us out to 8 or 9 feet from the shore, correct?
Well, so that's what I spoke to about the effectiveness of Tribune versus sonar. So what we did at Farmers Beach was utilize Tribune, which is a diquat, which is a contact herbicide. It's just a defoliant.
It's just a
Just
defoliant.
pretty
Okay.
much like your Roundup.
All right.
And so, but it's only effective to waters 8 feet or higher.
All right.
When you're getting down into a lower basin, it's not as if, it's hard to get it down in there, and it's open end. And so if you don't treat the entire plant, then it can regenerate.
All right, so that the other one will go right down to the bottom of the lake and work it systemically up into the plant that way,
Yeah, so
rather
the
than down.
entire
Right.
water basin will effectively have 3 parts per billion of this herbicide in it.
All right, okay. All right.
Is-
And it's my understanding that this has been done at Crystal Lake to success, right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's our example of,
It has been done twice,
All
for
right.
success. And it's been done at East and West Okoboji as well. And Crystal Lake is a really good example where this has been done previously and continued. Not only are they effectively eradicating Eurasian milfoil, but they have a 5-year plan where they are attempting to see if they can't reduce or eradicate curly leaf pondweed as well. The difference between Eurasian water milfoil and curly leaf pondweed is the means in which they reproduce. So Eurasian milfoil is reproduced by fragmentation, and so that's the important part when we're talking about recreation. When we have crops turning this up, cutting it up, that's how they spread. They also can spread by seed, but majority is by fragmentation. Curly leaf pondweed has what's called a turion. It's almost like a crown or something like that, and that can sit dormant within your sediment basin for 15 years. So unfortunately, it's very difficult to remove curly leaf pondweed once it's infiltrated your water basin. So what the DNR are doing now is doing a annual treatment of Crystal Lake to see, and then taking samples of the core samples of the sediment to see if they can't see a reduction in those turions, to see if that eradication is plausible.
So what and Scott and I have talked about this briefly, but when we come back a second time where you're looking for some shekels from us, then that's where we'll go, as we did in the restoration of the lake, which was 50, 40, 10, 50 being Clear Lake, 40 being the county, and 10 being Ventura.
Okay,
You know, I've already talked to some of the people at Ventura that this is a possibility.
excellent.
And that, you know, but now we're looking into almost 2026, aren't we, for that first bump?
Right, yeah, yeah. So, you know, when our first the first conversation we had of hopefully doing it in 2024, just to try to get ahead
Yeah,
of it,
yeah.
we were really looking for letters of intent of funding. Because we now have a larger timetable to allocate those funds now, then we can kind of provide some basis for our funding and have that on reserve if we need it. And there's a chance that we don't. You know, a good example of that is the conditions as it is now. So we're about a foot under the weir right now. If we have a dry fall like this next year, there's very little chance of dilution of the concentration. So we might not need any bumps. And if we have a really cold winter and we have a lot of ice and snow coverage, then we're not going to we're not going to require those additional bumps. And
But it's critical.
It could be just a single application.
It's critical that we maintain that lake, you know, over the years. Scott has said this, we've all said it, that, you know, we've probably put between the county and the city, both cities, you know, over $25 million has gone into that lake to make it success. And we know that that lake is one of the keys to this city. So it's very, very important that we maintain that. And we even paid, I think, Scott, those boat check things that come
yeah,
out there.
claim
Didn't we buy
stations,
one
yeah.
or a couple or whatever? And, you know, that's another check on that, so.
And that's a great point to bring up because,
Yep.
you know, working with Kim Bogenschutz specifically, over this next year, there's going to be a focus on those aquatic invasive species stations and outreach.
Yeah.
There is some opportunities where we can have smaller units that, you know, the units that are in place vary between $15,000 to $45,000 for
Yeah.
those larger units.
Yeah.
What they have at some other smaller ramps is signage that, you know, gives you information about how to clean it, but also
Yeah.
provides those tools.
Right, right.
So
You just-
looking at that as also
Yeah.
an opportunity for installation here.
Yeah. Sometimes you gotta force them into that, but
That's
that's,
And, you know, with those watercraft inspectors and the aquatic
that'll
invasive
help.
species surveyors,
yeah,
all that's gonna be communicated to those
Yeah.
anglers
Yeah.
and boat users.
yeah. Good work, Joel. Good
Absolutely.
work. Great research that you've done here. Appreciate that and the information tonight.
Yeah,
So,
if you guys have any other further questions, feel free to reach out.
Will do, will do. Thank you, thank you. D, Ludwig Wanberg Municipal Band Shell Improvement Project Update to review pay estimate number 5. Mr. Stedding again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. Get started here with the pay estimate. Please note that original contract amount to Dean Snyder Construction for $754,000. No change orders. We have contract completed and stored to date, $285,431. Take out our standard 5% retainage of $14,271.55. Brings us to that total less retainage of $271,159.45. We'll remove our previous request payments for $208,101.30, which brings us to our current request for payment of $63,058.15, which brings our remaining contract bill to $482,840.55 for this project. Project's coming along well. Most caseworks off at fascia has been completed. Electricians are currently working. We have a lot of exterior lighting going around the facility there that's gonna really look nice when everything's completed. I talked to project superintendent today and they have started, so Fundermax is the name of it, but it's a HPL, which is a high pressure laminate, which is what goes underneath the band shell portion. And they have all the furring strips up, painted it black to help with any shadowing that may happen. And they've started to lay that HPL system on there, and he said it's going really well so far. So he's excited what the finished product's going to look like. He's optimistic about it. And the public restroom portion, they kind of held that off right now just due to the year, the season that we're in. They want to get that HPL set on the ceiling portion, and then after that they'll go in. We're looking at 2 weeks, 3 weeks tops to redo those public restrooms, and they can do those, as we progress here, so that's not an issue. And the inside is done. Handicap ramp lift has been installed, so everything pretty much in the interior is completed. So we're renting out as we go here. So yeah, if you guys have any questions,
Yeah,
happy to
that,
answer.
we watched that going on the other day, and those guys up there doing that ceiling, I don't know if you call it a ceiling, whatever it is, in that band shell, it's practically like Michelangelo doing the Sistine Chapel. They're lying on the back, going over time. Yeah.
They'll be thrilled.
Crazy, crazy. Any questions further? Thank you. Need a motion to approve pay estimate number 5 in the amount of $63,058.15.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Dana, seconded by Mark, that we approve the Lud-Wanberg Municipal Band Shell Improvement Project amount $63,058.15. Is there any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. E, purchase of new replacement playground equipment for City Park Lower Area Review. Jacob Woodman, Director of Finance Administrative Services. Welcome, Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So this will be in the white sheets towards the end of your packet there. So in our fiscal year 25 budget, we put $50,000 in to kind of redo some of the playground equipment at the lower city park, right down there by the band shell. And so we had CDI out of Forest City. They graciously earlier this spring redid the old merry-go ground that's down there for us. They took it, stripped it all down, and repainted it for us. And so that was kind of phase one of the project. And then we went out for bids to replace the rest of the equipment down there to 3 different recreation companies. Each of these 3, I believe the city has worked with in the past, so they all have a good reputation. The first bid we got was from Cunningham Recreation. They are out of Charlotte, North Carolina, but they do have a local sales rep in Iowa here. Their bid was for $43,533.02, which was the low bid. But if you go to in your packet, I think it's around page number 5 there. It shows kind of the rendering of what they were proposing for equipment down there. And while it is a very nice place, it is much smaller than what the bid Pro Recreation provided to us. So then that brings us to the second bid, which was from PlayPro, and that was for $45,418. And that's kind of that first rendering that you guys see there. This is just standard colors. We'll keep different coloring when we actually get the playground set. But as you can see there, this one has 3 slides. It has a climbing area. It has a pool on the back there. It has a lot more features for the children. And so the recommendation would be to go with their bid, even though it was slightly higher than Cunningham, just because it does provide a much bigger set for the kids to play on. And I think it'll really be a nice addition down there. The equipment that's been down there has been down there for a number of years. And so just upgrading to something that provides a few more amenities for the kids. And it's just safe, up to today's standards. Will just be a great benefit down there. And that price does include installation. Any questions?
Questions for Jacob? Thank you, Jason. Therefore, I entertain a motion to approve the purchase from Ply Pro Recreation, Clive, Iowa, in the amount of $45,418. Motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Bennett, seconded by Creighton, that we approve $45,418 for the purchase of new playground equipment in City Park. Any discussion? Favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion carries. Thank you. Surf District Streetscape Improvement Project update, review of pace number 3. Matt. Thanks again, Matt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. Kick off here, we note that original contract amount to Dean Snyder Construction, the amount of $4,284,533.24. We had an approved change order deduct of $766,980.79, which brings that revised contract amount to $3,517,572.45. We have here contract completed to date and stored of $1,930,938.83. Take out our standard 5% retainage of $96,546.97, brings us to our total completed less retainage of $1,834,391.86. We'll remove our previous payments of $1,578,364.73, which brings us to our current request for payment of $256,027.13, which leaves the remaining contract to bill $1,683,180.59. A lot of numbers there. Project's going well. We continue to progress at 7th Avenue. Wapsie Pines is back on site this week to set some pavers in the intersection of 7th Avenue. We're looking to get that buttoned up hopefully here in the next couple weeks, and then we'll move forward. We got a lot of the pavement, Castor has a lot of the pavement in between 7th and 8th, so we'll be kind of bouncing from 7th all the way up to the intersection of 8th, and we'll take care of a couple bump outs there. Pops Excavating was on site last week and finished all the helical piers up by the railroad tracks for our gateway structure. So those are completed. The next step would be to start to complete the footing portion of the gateway structures there that the piers will eventually sit on. And yeah, we're just keep plugging away, get as much done as we can this year, and hoping to still have Buddy Holly done this year if all goes according to plan. So keep plugging away. You guys have any questions?
People will appreciate when that boulevard is gone. It's a good job, yeah. Any questions, Matt? Thank you, Matt. Therefore, entertain a motion to approve pay estimate number 3 regarding Surf District Streetscape Improvement Project amount of $256,027.13. Motion, please.
So moved.
Moved by Creighton, seconded by Mark, that we approve pay estimate number 3. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Motion carries. Thank you. Chief, report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Just a couple things to report. I think Jennifer sent out to you guys the August monthly last week. Didn't know if you guys have any questions after reviewing the information there. If so, I'd love to answer them. And then if there are none, last weekend we had the Harvest Festival, which went off great. And I had a lot of people reach out to me about how enjoyable it was. We don't have any issues throughout the event. Had a retired friend of mine who's was a police chief for many years. That was his first experience in Clear Lake this weekend, and he said it was great. He'll be back. So very, very well received, and it was a great weekend for him to have his first Clear Lake visit too. So any questions today? I don't have a lot to report today.
I'm glad you did that map for the festival.
Planted that one on to Captain Hines this last time, so it was his
all
first
right.
voyage.
Well,
into doing
tell
that,
him
so
that, then, yeah.
Came up to speed on doing those.
Yeah. I know there weren't, not everybody abided by that, but that's
For your force.
where the cookie
Job's
crumbles.
Yeah. Oh, but it was good. I think earlier issues were smaller parking issues, which
Yeah.
is always, we have big events, there's always limited parking uptown, and so we just manage that the best we can.
No, great job.
Other than that, though, we really didn't have any issues whatsoever. It was a very well-received event. a lot of people in town. I know Stacy's waiting for the numbers to come in soon, and I think we'll see, just from what I look at call volume and stuff, same as last year or even more maybe too, so,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
wonderful that we're growing and
Yeah.
moving forward.
Yep, and the weather cooperated, so that was key there.
Maybe even a little warm.
Any questions for Chief? Thanks, Chief. Director of Finance Administrative Service Report, Jacob? 0. Okay, Public Work Directors, Jeremy. Jeremy Kornberg, Director, Public Works. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Just a few updates on some things Public Works has been up to. We just finished a kind of a joint project with the Clear Lake School District down there at the outdoor classroom. If you were down there this spring when we had all the rain, there was a lot of standing water. So we, with Matt and the school, kind of came up with just kind of a relief drainage tile. So the school offered to pay for the materials to, and then we would install it. So our crews installed roughly 150 feet of drain tile, put in an intake, and then piped it into our storm sewer just as kind of an overflow when we get those major events. Kind of creates a relief for them, as well as eliminates a very, very large mosquito habitat in the spring when we're doing those situations. So that went fairly well. A couple other things, we had budgeted for some speed radar signs for this budget season, so we did get those ordered. We're just kind of waiting for them to come in, and then we will work on getting those placed correctly. They will be solar signs, and they can be moved if the solar doesn't work out in some areas that we're looking at, just with tree canopy, et cetera. So, that'll be very nice to get. The other thing is you guys approved the traffic control updates on Highway 18 and North 8th. We have that scheduled to be installed Tuesday, October 15th. So we'll be talking with PD just because there will be a portion of time where that does just go straight to a four-way stop, no lights or anything during the day there. So we'll have a couple vendors on site to get all that installed. Hopefully it won't take too long. We're kind of doing some pre-work already, so hopefully it goes pretty smooth. And then obviously, just to reiterate, next week is our large item drop-off, starting Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So, and then I think the appliances is pick up on Tuesday. So, looking forward to that. Have received a few calls about that. Nothing, just kind of clarification on what we can drop off and whatnot. So, hopefully it will go smooth. Any questions for me?
Great job throughout the summer, though. I've said this before, in your guys picking up, putting down all those barricades, picking them back up the next, I mean, everybody says, the next morning after we have an event downtown, you'd never know there was an event the night before. And we do a good job of that, PD and you guys working together along with the water department, well done.
Yeah. Some of that new signage came in very handy, the barricade style, handicap parking, no parking 2 a.m. to 5 have been very helpful, a lot easier to set up. And actually had the surf call me and ask me where we got those because we're going to get some for their parking as well. So just a very nice addition to the traffic control that we have. So, yeah.
Well done. Thanks. City engineer report, update on Surf District.
No, I
Promise?
I don't have a lot here. Music Enrichment Center, everything's pretty much interior at this point. Drywall, insulation. They're still rolling on the EFS on the exterior, but that's coming along really good, and they're gonna get that buttoned up here before the end of the year. And yeah, I just, would recommend taking another tour here as we progress into the winter months and just kind of stop in and see the guys and look at the, progress being made there would be my recommendation. And as far as our city hall renovation, probably no one noticed, but we have a front door now. So that is a exciting time. And we're hopefully getting very close to buttoning up. Leland, to my knowledge, is working on that transaction counter, which is kind of that last piece before Eddie's gets our ballistic glass installed in the reception area. And after that, we just have little odds and ends pieces to pick up. Jim and Dudes has some plumbing left to complete. Just like I said, some odds and ends, and yeah, I think everything will be pretty much in place. Hung a TV today into the block wall in the conference room, so that shaved off about $20K. You're welcome. Besides that, I think it's going good.
Any questions for? Hey, thanks. Thanks, good. Chief?
Thanks, Mayor, Council. Just a little bit here. We had 110 calls in September. It's about 30 less than we had last year. As I told them, we're not in the business of making calls here. You know, we could get by with a lot less than that. That's not somewhere, you know, looking to do is have more calls. But and I'll get you. I don't have the 24 updated date to date at this point. I think it's about 1,100 so far up to date. So we're still catching up. Pancake breakfast, those of you that showed up, was good. Pancake went real well. We had a good turnout. We're looking at probably somewhere between 1,500 and 1,600 people. That's a lot. The guys all had a good time. Everybody had a good time putting that on. So we'll hopefully we'll get it done next year. The new ATV is here, or UTV, whatever you want to call it. It wasn't here more than about a day and a half before we used it south of town on a cornfield fire. And it started out as a bean field fire and it ended up in the corn. It would have been a disaster if the guy hadn't brought a disc. We'd have had fighting cornfield fires is not easy when they're fully up. So he came out with a disc and kind of circled it around it and put it out for us. Otherwise, you just can't really put them out. You stay at one end and wait for it to get to you. Our plan right now is to drive that vehicle. We've got to get lights on it. We'll get all the red lights and stuff on. We're going to drive that to most grass fire calls. It'll run 55 miles an hour, no problem. As soon as we get the windshield in, it'll be a lot easier. It's kind of hard on your teeth otherwise at 60 miles an hour. But we will be driving it. We'll be tracking. We'll be using the trailer to track the second one out there, our track ATV. We're going to look till we get a new tank in that track ATV. Put a little smaller tank on it, similar to what's in the new one. And then we'll take that tank that's in the ATV now and put it in the back of the pickup. That'll give us 3 vehicles out there that we can get in the fields and fight fire with. What is happening this week? It's Fire Prevention Week. Now I'm going to ask you, why did we start Fire Prevention Week in the United States? What caused that?
Chicago fire.
There you go. Scott was listening to the PA. He was listening to the.
I just know history.
He just read about it in the paper. What can I say? Yeah, there was a great Chicago fire that started that, and it wasn't Mrs. O'Leary's cow. There was another fire in Wisconsin that was just as deadly or worse. So let's keep in mind there were two fires that caused Fire Prevention Week. Okay. Bud is coming out of the water. It'll be coming out pretty soon, probably this week. We'll take it out of the water. We'll get some service done to it, then we'll put it away for storage. You know, Fire Prevention Week, obviously we're asking everybody to, you know, think about fire prevention all the time, not just during one week. It's really dry right now. Please, we're asking people just to really be careful if they're going to do any kind of burning whatsoever. It's so dry. Hopefully, we're working on it. We're going to have a little fun Halloween at the fire station, so we're going to have a little trick-or-treat program at the fire station. We're asking everybody come through for candy. I don't know what else is going to happen. I haven't heard from the committee. I hope it's nothing disastrous, but we're looking to have a trick-or-treat there. And so we're going to get that information out to everybody so we can have some fun. The guys wanted to do it. It's just a good way to get the kids to come to someplace, help out with the fire department, maybe a little recruiting there. I mean, you know, down the road, somebody's got to replace Doug and I, so we'll maybe get that done. So we'll get the information out to you some way. I may have to talk to you about getting some information out on that, but we just have to go buy the candy and get it down there. So any questions for me at this point in time?
Well done.
Thanks for your support.
Well done. Thanks. Under Mayor's report, you know, Jennifer Larson did just, once again, a wonderful job as being chair of the Harvest Festival. A lot of hard work there by a lot of people, and as was said earlier, it's growing and growing and growing, and good combination of work with the PD and everybody else, Public Works, and then, of course, her committee alone, you know, does all the pickup at the end of all the little bits and pieces, and puts up with all the interesting people that come and try to serve food and everything else there. So, well done, Jennifer. Well done. Very, very well done. That fire department, when you have all those people there, I noticed yesterday morning, you know, that's a good sense of building community within our community. The time I was there, that place was packed, and there were kids and grandparents and all over, and that's just another event that we have that builds this togetherness. That
We were really happy with it.
That-
I think it's really grown.
Yeah.
The guys, like I said, the guys love doing it.
Yeah.
And I think people have gotten used to coming there for that fancy breakfast and kind of like sitting around, you know. As I tell some of them, though, this isn't Perkins. You can't sit here. People in the
Well done, well done. I want to quickly in my report here go back to the PD, and if you read this paper that was out there, there are some people that may not like this, but I think it's good because it's truly diversity on the street. But I tallied those figures up in there with golf carts and UTVs. There's a total of 806 of them together that are licensed anyway on the street. Now you add that with motor-assisted bicycles. I won't go any further with that one, but motor-assisted bicycles and motor-assisted scooters and side-by-sides, and then ATVs. I don't know, maybe I'm saying the same thing, but there's a difference between a UTV and an ATV. You know, you've got all those added to our normal cars and trucks and semis that pass through, you know. I'd say we had diversity in our traffic flow here, but we make it work. We make it work. Very.
Snowmobiles there in another month or two.
Yeah, well, yeah. Sorry about that. Scott, you're on.
Real quick, we're running late. So we had a couple planning listing posts on our 4th Avenue South multimodal corridor planning study, so several of you attended that. And interestingly, we had a number of businesses attend that, each one of those sessions as well. So I was pleased with that. So our consultant, SEH, is working on that, and there'll be more public awareness coming out on that as the plan continues to evolve. And then just real quickly, the Destination Iowa project, I think you're aware we're moving the lake connection piece over to Beach Drive. So Matt and I have been working on kind of how that's going to work with the streetscape improvements. So I'll be bringing something back at the next meeting, probably for a change order on that, to include that within the scope of the streetscape improvements. Jacob and I had a call with the state on that, and they were very supportive of that change. So we're in good shape there. So that's all I got.
That's good. Well done, everybody. Thanks for this evening. Meeting adjourned.